I was messing around with the dials of the old radio. Even though it was nearly midnight and most stations had stopped broadcasting, it was a beautiful beast, that radio. It was made in 1920 and had a shell of oak. The air was silent and still. I could hear nothing but static. Then, "Daddy, is that you? Can you hear me?" I nearly jumped out of my skin when I heard that. Her voice was like a sorrowful angel. It was also very familiar. I hadn't heard that voice for many years. Rosie? Tears welled up in my eyes. Rosie passed away when she was just 7 years old. "I miss you, Daddy. Will you come and visit me?" I frowned, looking at the moon shining in through the window. It was getting really late, but Rosie needed me. "Sure, honey," I said. There was no going back. The path leading to the graveyard was dark, illuminated only lightly by the moon. Weeds twisted and grew on the edges. Creepers hung down by the sides. I had to push through vast undergrowth to move through. It felt like I was walking through an untamed jungle. Finally, the path opened up to where more light fell. Gravestones stood in groups of 2s or 3s, staring at me solemnly as I walked past. Some had withered flowers lying on freshly turned soil. Finally, I found Rosie's grave. Unlike the others, her gravestone was cracked and worn down by the rain and the wind. I could barely make out the words on her grave. I knelt down in front of it, bowed my head. "I love you, Rosie," I whispered, tears in my eyes. "No, you don't." I jerked up my head to see my daughter scowling at me. Her eyes were bloody and swollen, her lips cracked and purple. Her neck was bent at an awkward angle. She was wearing a dirty white dress. "You never visited my grave. You just forgot about me. You're a terrible father." Spindly, pale hands reached out from the soil and grabbed my waist, anchoring me to the ground. For the first time, Rosie cracked a smile. The soil rose up around me, licking my body. The hands dragged me downward. "But you're here now," she said, "and you'll be forever with me." Hello, today's story is The Handsome Boy by Simba the Savage 8. The link to the original story and his subreddit will be in the description below. I just got a new roommate, Phoebe, who moved in last Saturday. She reminded me a lot of myself back in my schooling days. Shy, quiet, always had her nose buried in a book. She seemed to appreciate my company though. She enjoyed the vase of red roses I placed on her bedside table as a welcome gift. A few days later, when Phoebe was settled in and happy, there was a knock on the door. Phoebe opened the door to find a young man standing there. He had a chiseled, smooth face, olive skin, and big black eyes. He was dressed casually in a gray hoodie and cargo shorts. "Hi there," he said cheerfully. "I'm your new neighbor, Danny. It's nice to meet you." Phoebe blushed. There was something about Danny that blew her away. Love at first sight, that's what they call it. She invited him inside and they chatted over tea. Turned out they had a lot of the same interests. He liked a lot of the same books. I hated Danny. He was a Prince Charming no one really needed. I did everything in my power to make him feel unwelcome. I misplaced his things. I thwarted his plans to spend time with Phoebe by messing up his schedule. I even sent fake text messages to him from his parents. But despite my best efforts, Phoebe gradually fell under his spell some more. Every night she would sigh as she stared at photographs of him or them spending time together. He was over at dinner every day, and sometimes they would even sleep together, intertwining like a nest of baby snakes. To make it even worse, Danny seemed to have noticed my presence over time, and he didn't like me either. He started burning sage and incense around the house. He chanted prayers to make me go away. He consulted mediums and held seances. Danny even encouraged Phoebe to participate in them, and together they would sprinkle salt around the house. With his continued efforts, I gradually grew weaker and weaker. I could no longer watch over Phoebe. I could only watch helplessly as Danny finally stabbed Phoebe with a big knife, grinning like a maniac. Warm blood trickled out of her chest and toward the floor, just as he had done to me 10 months before. Today's story is The Face Outside My Window by Simba the Savage 8. I was reading a book when I heard it. A faint tap 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 on my window. I sighed, closed my book, and looked outside. A face stared back at me. Just the face. No body or neck, no bony fingers that tapped my window. It floated outside, the gingery hair wild in the wind and waving around like a nest of hissing snakes. Rain dripped down bony white cheeks. The eyes bulged out, veins popping out of the whites and storm blue irises. The nose was long and thin, with snake holes for nostrils. The lips were painted crimson, the mouth wide open in a smile revealing pearly white fangs. And still came that ghastly tap 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 sound. "Let me in," the face whispered. I hurriedly closed the curtains, double-checked my locks, and leaned against the wall, my breath coming out in short gasps. My heart was beating so hard against my ribs I thought it might fracture. All I could think about was that face. To distract myself, I pulled out my phone and began surfing the internet, hoping to take my mind off things. I looked at the funniest memes on Reddit and was laughing out loud when I got a ping from an unknown number. The profile picture was the face. "Can I come in?" My heart started to pound again. I turned off my phone and there it was on the shiny black screen, leering back at me, unwavering. I slowly turned around. There was no one there, no floating face. I forced myself to calm down. Maybe I just need to get some sleep. I headed to my bedroom, keeping a wary eye out for any intruders or pranksters. I changed into my pajamas and prepared to brush my teeth. As I looked in the mirror, the color drained out of my face until it was bone white. My eyes started to swell until I could see the veins. My iris was turning a deep blue. My nose grew smaller, my eyebrows settling itself into place. My lips grew redder, my mouth widened into a sinister smile. Pearly white fangs emerged from under my teeth and grew outwards into twin walrus tusks. Then my bony white face cracked, revealing crimson scars. I stared in horror at the face, my face, smiling back at me. Then came the rhythmic tap tap tap. I looked down to see my bony white fingers tapping on the glass. Tap tap tap. Today's story is The Fantastical Honeydew Forest by Simba the Savage 8. Honeydew Forest is full of possibilities, and you know it. That's why you agreed to the multi-million deal to develop your land into a state-of-the-art condominium. It would have everything you'll ever want: a swimming pool, tennis courts, and a gym. Nestled in the heart of one of the biggest rainforests in Southeast Asia. You know it's going to be a huge hit. Before you inherited the forest that was owned by your family for many generations, your father made you promise to take care of the land properly. Of course you didn't listen. Why would you? That deal's worth more than a silly promise. You walk through Honeydew Forest for the last time, walking on your favorite trails. The forest is full of memories of walking on well-trodden paths with your family, memories of your father showing you various species of flora and fauna, explaining how they are beneficial to humans. As you venture deeper into the forest, the voices of the contractors fade away in the distance. The air is still and silent, holding its breath. Tall trees crowd around you, standing so close together that you cannot see the light, staring at you sullenly as you walk by. Dead leaves litter the ground, crackling under your feet. Then you come to a particularly tall tree, standing higher than the rest. Its branches hang down low though, about the level of your chest. Creepers twist and turn around the trunk, shining like jewels in the gloom. You reach out and touch one of the branches, remembering how, as a young child, you would climb the trees to see how far you would go, whooping and hollering the higher you went. That's when the creepers bend downwards and curl around your legs. Then they hoist you up through the foliage and the leaves. Branches twist and fasten securely around your body. You struggle, but like a trapped moth, you cannot move. You cannot escape. Then you hear what sounds like a war cry. Flocks of birds, sunbirds, crows, woodpeckers fly toward you, hollering in triumph. There's a pattern of feet and hordes of squirrels rush up the tree trunk and up your legs. They're all over you now, their wings being against your face, their claws scraping against your thigh. You can drill into your eyes, tearing out bits of drunken flesh. Small claws reach in through your flesh and tear out your heart and stomach and guts. Warm blood fertilizing the vines, innards spilling out to the outside. As life bleeds out of you in this dark, dense forest, you swear you hear the forest let out a sigh of happiness, as if finally glad you, who betrayed the forest, is gone. I let a creepy stranger come in my apartment. I was a 17-year-old college student in France when all this happened. I was living in an apartment next to my college campus with 2 roommates. I was coming back from class around 5:30 p.m. when I saw a guy waiting in front of our building. It was the kind of old building where you can enter without ringing. It was a big residence, so I just passed by him without really caring about why he was here. 15 minutes later, the same guy came up to my apartment. He pretended that he was one of Alex's friends, that he was waiting for him, but Alex was late. He also told me the exact place where Alex was doing an internship at the time and even told me about his schedule for the day. With all the information he gave, I was confident that they knew each other, so I just let him in. For the record, Alex's father used to work for a big company at the time, so even by looking up on the internet, it was impossible to find anything about him. As a good host, I offered him something to drink and started talking with him while waiting for Alex. The conversation quickly turned darker when he started to tell me about his suicidal past and about the amount of guns he was keeping at his home. It was getting late, and as the conversation got darker, I started to feel uncomfortable with him, so I decided to send a text to Alex to let him know that his friend was here and that I wasn't feeling really comfortable with him. Alex answered me a few minutes later, asking me to send him a picture of his friend, just to see who was here. So I took my phone and discreetly took a picture of the person in front of me. After receiving it, Alex just told me that he was on his way home. When Alex arrived, I was relieved. He came in the living room and said hello to his friend, but then he just sat down and an awkward silence came along with it. After about a minute, I received a text from Alex telling me, "I don't know this guy." At that moment, I thought he was joking around, but after seeing his face, I knew he was serious. So here we are, 2 young college students stuck with a stranger that apparently knows a lot about Alex without even meeting him. We were both really young at the time, and we didn't really react in a good way. Every human being in this kind of situation would have called the police or asked them to leave, but we were really lost and didn't think about it. We were scared of his reaction if we would have asked him to leave, so we thought, hey, let's eat early so he will feel uncomfortable not being invited for dinner and leave. But as we were dining in the kitchen, he just stayed in the living room and started to watch TV without even asking us. At the same time, our 3rd roommate, Polly, just came home from work. She entered the apartment and said hi to the guy in the living room before joining us in the kitchen. She then asked us who he was and was not really happy when told her. We didn't have any idea of who he was or how to make him leave. We explained to her our dumb strategy of just living our life until he feels uncomfortable and leaves, and she started to act with us and just tell us about her day. At that moment, Polly was going through a rough period and was telling us about it. Not a really fun story to tell or listen, but while she was telling us about her misery, the guy in the living room joined us in the kitchen and started laughing at Polly's story before going back to watch TV. It was really creepy. At this moment, Alex had enough and asked us to leave the apartment while he was going to deal with the guy. This is what happened when we left. Alex got back to the living room and started to act like he was about to go to bed. His room was opening on the living room, so as he told the guy that he was about to go to bed and left the door half opened. While starting to remove his jewelry, he noticed that the guy on the couch wasn't moving or caring about the fact that there was no one left in the apartment except Alex that was in his room. Alex went up to him and told him that maybe it was time for him to leave as he was his friend and that he was going to sleep, but the guy replied to him, "I am waiting for the girls." Alex got mad and finally put him out of the apartment. At the same time, Polly and I were going back in the building and met the guy in the stairs. He wished us a good night with a creepy smile and left. Going back to the apartment, Alex told us what happened, and we started asking ourselves, who was that guy? How did he know Alex's name and surname? How did he know where he was working in his schedule? How did he find our address? We spent a part of the night trying to find an answer without any success. We learned from our mistakes and decided to never open the door again to someone we didn't know. 2 weeks later, Polly was chilling in her room. She was home alone. Her window was giving a view on the parking lot. As she was looking through it, she saw a red car parking. The guy was back. Polly got the very good idea to know his license plate and to verify the door was locked. The guy came up to the apartment and told Polly the exact same thing that he told me the first time he came. Polly got mad and told him that if he was still here in 5 minutes, she would call the police. It was the last he came. A few weeks later, Alex came back home after work, telling us he finally remembered where he already had met the guy. So here's the story. Alex used to go in a bar where you were able to play video games while drinking. Apparently the guy was in the same bar at the machine next to him and tried to talk to Alex, but he was too focused on his game and only took the time to tell him a quick hello. We think that the guy probably followed Alex around for a week or two after that day. We moved out of the apartment a few months after this story. Anyway, would love not to meet this one. Today's story is Smile. I was born smiling. No, really, I slept on my mother's womb, covered in a film of blood, while the other babies around me erupted into wails a few minutes later. I was laughing and smiling. As I grew up, I wondered why I was the only one who smiled all the time. Everybody else was so volatile. They screamed, they wailed, they threw tantrums. Even the adults had their limits, and sometimes they got even angrier when they had too much to drink. I was hit all the time. I was even bullied in school for smiling too much. Freak, they said. But I never complained. I kept on smiling and laughing. Can other people smile too? I asked myself that question all the time. Then I decided it was my calling to make them smile. After all, it was best to be happy, wasn't it? I started with Jack. He was never a happy boy. His family beat him, I think. At school, he would sit down at the lunch table and stare at his food, his hoodie over his head. I did everything to make Jack smile. I told jokes, I pulled pranks, but Jack would stare back at me with nothing in his eyes. He was a hopeless case, pun intended, so I decided that desperate times called for desperate measures. I invited him to my house one day. He agreed readily. I think he was willing to be away from his parents for once. Then I knocked him out with some sleeping pills that I mixed with his cola. Once he was asleep and secure to my bed, I got to work. It was all a matter of knife work. I was very pleased with my results. I widened his mouth with my knife, twisted both ends upward into a thin smile. Jack looked a bit like a vampire with blood splattering his face and dripping down on my bed sheets, but it was just a side effect of my genius. When Jack woke up and looked into my bedroom mirror, he screamed. I took that as a thank you. He rushed out the door and never came back, but I didn't mind. He was smiling now. That was all that mattered. After him, I took my knife to school and began my life's work. People tried to run away. I didn't get it. Smiling is good. Being happy is good. I was trying to make their lives better. I was trying to make them happy. I was doing God's work, you know. If you smile, the whole world will light up for you. Now everybody understands. Everybody is smiling. Except for you. You're always frowning all the time. Why? There's so much in the world to laugh and smile about. But don't worry. I'm here. Don't struggle. You'll only make things worse. Just relax. And I promise, you will be smiling in no time. Today's story is Not My Anthony by Langejello001. My Anthony, my little brother Anthony. Since he was born, I've known him, and although we never got along, I know almost everything about him. And I know that whoever took his place isn't my brother. He walks like him, he talks like him, he even knows all the things little Anthony would, but it's not him. He has my parents fooled. They still think of him as their little star child, their little Anthony. I watch what he does carefully. He goes to a school, and he's fooled all of my Anthony's friends. But he isn't my Anthony. He's still intelligent, he's still great at soccer, he still hates the taste of Brussels sprouts and loves Skittles, but it isn't him, and I have proof. So when my parents weren't home, and they took the fake to Anthony's soccer championship for the weekend, I went into the garden, and as I found the spot underneath the marigolds, I began to dig. I dig deeper, and I continued to dig deeper. And once my shovel hits a thud, I brush off the dirt and filth to reveal the rotting corpse of my little brother, my Anthony. I like the fact that I became a Stephen King fan when I was a little child, a few years after I learned to read. I also love still being a big King reader all those years later, 37 to be exact. Now as a man that generally likes to read, I would often, after a day's worth of work, lay down in my bed, grab a book, and kill my few extra minutes before my wife tucks herself next to me as she turns down the lamp. On a Tuesday night, I sat on the edge of the bed, as my finger was going slowly through the books laying patiently on the shelf when it abruptly stops for no reason on Christine. I pulled it out, dragged myself higher on the bed, and opened the book. I was about 2 chapters in when all of a sudden my ears start ringing, as I see through my blurry gaze something on the ground in front of me that almost looks like a jaw. Suddenly I find myself back on the edge of the bed. What the heck? I question myself while my finger stopped again on Christine. I pull it out, open it and start to read, this time sitting on the bed's edge. Not even a chapter in, my vision becomes blurry again, but this time I didn't hear ringing in my ears, since something was going through the general zone of my earlobe. I didn't feel it come in, but I could sense the thing that impaled me getting pulled out. What the heck is this? A creature that kills you if it doesn't like what you're doing? I was wondering while waking up on the same edge of the same bed. This time I found my finger sitting on my right knee. Confused, I got up and went to the desk. I sat down, opened my laptop, and started wandering on YouTube. I don't know if it will leave me this time, but the power just shut down and I don't have any flashlight at hand to go check the generator. I've been to hundreds of gigs, witnessed the rise and fall of some of the greatest artists, the rise and fall of Cobain, the anarchy and tragedy of Keith Flint. I was born in the Bat Incident. Oh, how I loved it all. Now the sound of a song playing is like fingernails on a chalkboard. When I signed up for Spotify, I was in love. I made playlist after playlist, different moods, different genres of playlists for every occasion. It was all organized, bar one. I made a master playlist that I added everything to. Songs I haven't heard, songs I wasn't sure I liked, recommended bands. By the end it was a few 100,000 songs long, just unorganized chaos. I was browsing one night trying to find something new to listen to. I glanced at the master playlist. I wish I had time to sift through that properly. I don't know who or what heard me, but I blinked and suddenly I was transported to a white room with no doors or windows. I looked around and saw a stereo system and a computer with Spotify locked on the screen in the middle of the room. I don't know how long it's been. The computer won't let me skip the songs. I have to listen to it all the way through before it lets me choose if it stays on the playlist or it goes. I'm barely 1% through. God, I hate music now. Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for tuning in for tonight's story. This tale has been sent in by a fan who likes to stay anonymous. It's going to be a little different tonight since I was requested to react to the story while narrating it. A little odd, but not something I can't do, so let's dive in, shall we? The moment they spoke their first few words, I knew I was in love. The sweet sound always called me back. Eventually, I could not go without it anymore. It felt like a drug to me. Watching their videos over and over again made me feel so happy. Yet it was never enough. I wasn't close enough. Oh god, this already sounds like a yandere story right off the bat. If I turn out to be right, you people better leave a like. So, unsatisfied as I was, you can only guess what I did next. You don't think I would just sit around and wait for my luck. No, that is not how the world works. If I see my chance, I can and will do everything in my might to get what I deserve. Called it. Finding them was not too hard, really. It only took a few days of research. Turns out their sibling posted a couple of pictures of their face on their social media. With reverse image search, it was easy to find their Facebook and thus my beloved. And there they were, in all their glory. I had never witnessed such a perfect human being before. That seems a little much, but alright. It does scare me how easy it can be for someone to look you up. I wonder if anyone has tried this on me in the past, or will after I post this story. Kind of makes me feel uneasy. I felt like I could drown in their eyes, but I need to see it up close. Beauty like that had to be observed up close, wouldn't you agree? Agree? No, I would try and say hi to them first online, not on Facebook. Oh god, why am I giving advice for this? I knew you would understand. No, I don't. With a picture and a name, my search only became easier. Really, after looking through LinkedIn for a few hours, I found them. They have a very common last name, so it took longer than I had hoped. Also, a lot of frustration in cussing out the ugly people who wear the same name. Can you imagine? Someone else wearing the exact same first and last name? Maybe even the middle one. Oh, don't worry. I know that one too. It is even better than their first one. I should convince them to swap the two when I meet them in person. It has such a nice ring to it. Even better with my last name added to it. They work at a small company, it turns out. From what I could find on Google, there is only one facility. For the pictures on Google, it really looks weird. My love, why even work at such a crap hole when you can have the whole world? How much I would love to steal you away. I can only imagine the paycheck and the place you must live. Wait, when did the story start to prefer the significant other as you instead of they them? How much I would shower you in kisses and hold you close. There would be nothing you'd have to worry your little head about. After all, I could easily take care of you. How much I think about cooking for you, watching movies with you, playing games, dressing you up. Thinking of the things I could do makes me feel so warm inside. It's like having a dozen butterflies trapped inside wanting to burst out any moment. I needed to confess. I really wonder what the SO is like, because from this description it almost sounds like he wants to trap them in a cage and lock them away from the world. That is actually really scary to think about. After a month of hard work, I'd saved up enough money to travel to your home country. It was not cheap, but everything is worth it, my love. Everything for you. You'd have been there when I was on the plane to the US. That is an odd coincidence. I also live in that same country. I shouldn't look too deep into this. The writer is probably trying to scare me. It's common knowledge in which country I live. Very funny, scaring the narrator, haha. The trip was awful. A woman on the plane was unable to stop her child from crying. It kept crying throughout the trip. How am I supposed to listen to your voice when there's a spoiled brat crying? If we ever have children, then I am sure you would be a better parent. Our children will be the sweetest of angels. Of course, because of you, my love. I wonder how many you would like. 1, 2? I'm happy with any amount. Just ask. I will make love. Okay, that is enough of that. Does the writer continue? Oh yeah, they do. They certainly do. Oh my god, that is a lot of detail. I did not agree to narrate that. Skipping this part, okay. This looks safe for work again. After hiring a car, I could go and stand where I wanted. Not that it was needed, there was only one place for me to go next. Even though I'd love to see your country more. You would show me around, right? It could be our first date. A part of me wanted to pick you up from work, but there were so many eyes. I'm a shy person, so I came up with a different approach. Just imagine a stranger standing there, waiting until you'd finished at your job, ready to pull you into their car without pardon to drive you to God knows where. This is why it's important to learn self-defense. A fruit tastes better when it is ripe. I'm sure it'd be the same for you as well, my love. It was hard and it took so long for you to leave. Wait, that is the same company I work for. This is not very funny. They didn't try to dox me, did they? That wouldn't be possible, right? Is this even a story I'm narrating? When you did, I started the car and followed you. You didn't think any of it, did you? After all, most cars nowadays are black, so it probably didn't seem like I was following you home, right? It could have been anyone behind you. Of course, I didn't follow you all the way through. If I were to stop in front of your house, you would suspect me, right? We wouldn't want that. Don't you agree? What am I even supposed to say to this? Come on, it's just a stupid story. The only thing I need to do is wait until nightfall. Only romantic things happen then in movies, right? Where the hero swoops their lover off their feet and saves them from whatever's going on. I could be your hero tonight. How does that sound? And it just stops there. It feels unfinished. Where's the ending? That can't be it. What is wrong with this writer? Sending me a story like this. I feel shivers crawling up my spine. Glad it's just a story. Pepper must have knocked something over. I hope that cat is okay. That does not sound like my cat. Black car, what do I do? Okay, calm down. I need to call the police. Hello, 911, what is your emergency? There's a stranger in my house. I'm trapped in my recording room. Please, you need to save me. Okay, please stay calm. Is there any place you can hide? They are coming closer. Stay calm. What is your address? Hello, my love. Did I make you wait? Stay away from me! Today's story is The Last Laugh. They found Brandon Sanderson dead on his kitchen floor, foam spewing out of his mouth. His adult daughter found him, I think. Called 911 and the ambulance came with sirens roaring right away, but there was nothing the paramedics could do. Rigor mortis had already set in. It was obvious he was long gone. They found Marty Lee hanging from his closet door, swinging gently from the breeze. His head was bent gently, like an old scarecrow, the frayed rope looping around his neck. They ruled it as suicide. Poor Marty, they said, gone so soon. They found Marty's parents pinned to their closet door, knives dug deep into their flesh. Dried blood crusted their wounds. Their eyes were empty, gorged out. They were also skinned alive. They never caught who did it. 4 deaths in 3 states, apparently completely unrelated, except for one thing. Something none of the police ever connected. They all went to Sic de Pietro to see somebody they knew perform. See, I always wanted to run away and join the circus. Call it a crazy dream, but when I saw my first circus in 1987, when I was 7 years old, I was hooked. I dreamed of swinging from the trapeze and training the lions and elephants. But my parents laughed at me. They said my dreams were ridiculous. My brother Marty bullied me. He said I was a clown, too suited for circus life. Brandon Sanderson at school hated me. He'd always made me trip up my feet and scribbled on my textbooks. He laughed at me for being a weirdo. But I did it. I couldn't stand the taunts at home or school anymore. So I packed my things and joined the nearest circus in town when I was a teen. They welcomed me with open arms. I learned to throw silver knives fast and quick like silver bullets, but I never forgot my pre-circus days. How I was never wanted, how I was always pushed around. So I gave Brandon Sanderson delicious almond-flavored popcorn with my secret ingredient when he came. I gave Marty a rope when he came and showed him how to use it at his house. And my parents had a free demonstration on how accurate my knife-throwing skills were. They once called me a clown and said I was definitely ready for the circus. Now who has the last laugh? Today's story is knee deep. You're at the pool with your friends again. You remember the last incident but choose to ignore it. Something grabs your leg and starts dragging you underwater, making you pass out. You wake up. Back there, the end of a staircase almost filled with water. It reaches your knees. It feels more sinister this time. You go up the stairs, through a door. Inside, the floor is flooded, up to your knees again. White walls, no lights, but somehow you can still see. In front of you are 2 doors. You can't see inside. In one of them, you hear someone crying, in the other, someone laughing. You go through the door with the laughs. Not so bad, you think. Just a dark hallway with some water. The laughing becomes closer. You make it to another white room with a spiral staircase in the middle. The laughing stops. "Welcome back! I've missed you!" you hear coming through the hallway ahead. You were terrified, petrified. There it is, a creature standing in the hallway. You can see it drooling. It looks hungry. Within seconds, you begin running up the stairs, but it grows out its tentacles, grabs your leg, and throws you down the stairs. Everything goes blank. You wake up, back at your pool once again. None of your friends are there. It's only you. The world feels quiet, empty. No sights of any animals, no reception on your phone. You call out your friends, no answer. It feels as if you're all alone in this weird dimension, left to die alone. Today's story is The Ferry. He sat on the moving vessel, coffee in front of him, blaring alarms going off in his mind. He sips the coffee, icy and strong, creamed well, in a desperate need for a way to escape the alarms and the chaos. Kids clamored around, screaming incessantly, but he didn't realize this, with the alarms in his brain going haywire. He looked forward, staring at red leather seats, pressing his lean body against the table, processing in his mind danger, but not reacting to it. Noises rung through the building. Joy, a sinister laugh maybe, an utterance of pain. A joke was made, or maybe that was lamentation. A cry of fear, or a cry of hope, filled the moving vessel as he stared out at the vast sea, drinking his coffee. He didn't sense a thing until the .44 Magnum was pressed against his left temple. Still, he perceived it maybe as just some kind of dull itch. He looked to his left, seeing a blue-eyed man covering his face in a ski mask, pointing his weapon at him, his gloves stained with blood and a grin nearly visible through the mask, which concealed him. He looked forward again, drank a sip of the coffee, and looked to his left again. Bodies, so many bodies, blood on the ground, organs splattered on the floor. Gray matter contrasts the pale blue floor, staining it permanently. The stench was revolting, but it seemed to not process fully, still that death was a light pull away. A 1-second decision, his life could be gone. And maybe that's what he wanted, after all. Today's story is EARWORM. That summer, everyone was listening to that song. It was playing everywhere, a curious little tune. Lyrics no one was quite able to remember, a melody no one was quite able to hum. Scientific studies showed that the song was, in summary, a simple series of shrill, senseless sounds, a sequence of notes with no real rhyme or reason, like a cat walking over a keyboard. But emotional reactions to the chaotic melody varied wildly. Some burst into tears upon hearing it. Some smashed their phones or radios to the ground as if some internal fight or flight system had been activated. Others simply stared into space, blank-faced for the song's entire duration, and once it had concluded, responded with confusion to the idea that any song had been playing at all. It popped up randomly, sneaking onto playlist, blaring from mall speakers, cutting between commercials, every city, every country, all throughout a long, hot June. Over time, theories as to the song's origins gained more notoriety than the song itself. Was it an album plug? A sign of the Second Coming? No, it had to be the Russians. Yet, when no ciphers could be found encoded within the melody, when no ancient saviors returned from the dead and no world wars were instigated, interest waned, wilted, ran dry altogether. It had been written off as inexplicable by the time that last streams of the song itself began to lessen in frequency. Shriveling up within the public subconscious, like summer crops at the start of the fall, untended and out of season. The summer after that, everyone was staring at that ship. It seemed somehow to be located everywhere, a curious little blip in the fabric of reality. Colors that no one was quite able to remember, shapes no one was quite able to visualize. Scientific studies were never attempted. There was in the end a lack of time. After all, when hidden speakers inside the irrational structure began playing an all too familiar melody, humanity shriveled up within the universal subconscious, like summer crops at the start of an eternal autumn. This happened in 2008 when I was 9 years old. I lived in a townhome community where each road had two sides of homes. In between the backs of the houses, there was a back road with alleyways that went in between each building section. I lived on the edge of one of these, and my townhome was on one of the alleyways. I lived on one street, and across the back road on the opposite side lived an elderly woman whose name I don't even know. I am not sure what her situation was, but for whatever reason, she never liked me specifically. She was creepy and spray painted all of her windows so no one could see in her house. However, that never stopped her from sometimes staring out her bedroom window directly at mine and keeping it open at night to shine a red strobe light into my room across the way. She used to yell how she hated us. I was in the 4th grade, and on a particular January morning, I had unfortunately missed the bus. My dad sent me outside to get in the car so he could drive me, and he said he'd follow me out soon after. As I was walking to my dad's car, she came out of the alleyway next to my house, slowly with a gigantic kitchen knife behind her back. She raced and started running after me. I was faster than her, so I was able to avoid her and was able to get into the house. She walked and stood on the neighbor's porch across the way and stared at my house. I was terrified. My dad ran out and yelled at her, and she said she wanted to get rid of us. Stupid kids. My parents called the police, but the police sent her home and had an ambulance pick her up later. My parents went to some kind of court meeting about it, but I don't really know the details. I didn't see her after that until 1 year later. I don't remember that day, but it had snowed that morning, so I was going to run out of the front door and play in the snow. I opened the door to see her standing on the porch, but looking out towards the road. I panicked, closed and locked the door. I ran up to my parents' room and told them what happened, and we saw her walk off the porch up the street. I never saw her again after that. My family has since moved far away from there, but people I know say she still lives there, and her windows are still the same spray painted windows, though it doesn't affect me as much as it used to. I still don't like being around knives. So this was a few years ago at this point. I called an Uber to head to this beach club my parents and I were a part of from my house. The Uber driver picked me up and wouldn't stop talking to me about how he moved here from India. I didn't mind and I talked with him during the ride to be polite. He kept going down weird roads. Looking back, I think it was to talk to me for longer, but at the time he blamed it on his GPS and I was too afraid to call him out on it. When he finally got me to my destination, I said goodbye and left the car. Little did I know, he would park the car at the place I asked him to drop me off at and followed me down to the beach. People at the beach club saw him following me and said nothing. Looking back, it makes me scared to think of how easily he got away with this, even with how weird it must have looked. He found me on the beach and started talking to me. He wouldn't stop. He told me how pretty I was and how he was looking for a wife. I was too young and scared to feel like I could yell at him to go away. I just stood there, hoping someone would notice how weird this looked and how scared I was. Then he leaves and drives away. Later that night, I get a notification that he found me on Facebook and tried to add me as a friend. I deleted the app and blocked him. Since then, I'd only used Lyft. I tried finding a number to get him blocked from Uber, but there was no phone number to call, so to this Uber driver, let's not meet again.
I'm currently 21F, and this happened to me about 6 years ago when I was about 15 years old. I live in a relatively small town where everyone knows everyone. For reference, there were about 120 kids in my graduating class in high school. The town was so small that there's not a lot of ground to cover, so it wasn't unusual for parents to let their teenagers wander around outside with their friends. My friend from a different town had come over to my house because we were going to see my school's musical later that night. We decided to go wander around outside until it was time to go. She was from a different town, so she was unfamiliar with the area. I suggested we go down to my local train tracks because there's this cool cliff/overpass thing where you can sit and watch the river. I had been to the train tracks with my friends many times before, and people my age used to hang out there all the time. This was sometime in early March, so it was still quite cold where I lived. Even though it was chilly, I remember distinctively that I wore flip-flops for some reason. This will be important later. The train tracks intersected a street in my town, which was quite close to my house, so this was where we entered the tracks. We were walking and spotted a middle-aged man who was alone and on the phone. We thought nothing of it and kept walking. We made it to the overpass and were sitting there just hanging out when we noticed the man we passed earlier was slowly inching closer and closer. We both noticed this, but decided not to panic, since it was possible he was just making his way down to the tracks. Maybe 5 minutes passed, and the man was getting increasingly closer and closer to us. At this point, we noticed that he's getting closer to us at an alarming rate. He's not continuously in motion, it's more like we notice him standing still doing whatever, and then a minute later, he's standing still even closer to us than he was prior. Now, he's close enough where we can clearly make him out. He's within an earshot and could easily get to us if that was his goal. My friend and I were starting to get nervous. We were two teenage girls in the middle of essentially the woods, with no one around us other than this creepy man. I've watched a lot of investigation discovery in my day, so I think it's best to just try to promptly make my way out there without causing chaos. I decided it would be a good idea to pull out my phone and pretend to talk to my mother as we begin walking back to the main road. My friend and I are calmly walking down the tracks while I have my phone to my ear. I'm saying stuff like, "Yeah, we're at the tracks. We're on our way home." Just making shit up so this guy thinks my mom is aware of my exact location. There's a point where we have to walk directly past the man in order to make it to our destination. It's at this point where he opens his mouth and says clear as day,
"I know you're not on your phone."
At this point, my fight or flight kicks in and I'm terrified. Up until this moment, the creepy man had not directly said or done anything to make us think he was a direct threat. The situation was uncomfortable enough that my friend and I thought we better head out. When the man said these words to me, I quickly realized that the perceived threat was both real and dangerous. As soon as my brain registered what he said, my friend and I both ran for our lives. I was never one to enjoy physical activity, let alone running, but I could have won an Olympic marathon that day. I ran so fast, my flip-flop broke and I ended up running barefoot on the gravel that lined the tracks. I was so scared that if I looked back, I would see him running after me, so I didn't. When I finally began running out of steam, I quickly looked back and saw the man standing right where we left him. He didn't run after us, but I couldn't shake the fear of turning around and seeing him chasing me. When we made it to the main road, I quickly called my mom and told her what happened. She was conveniently driving down the exact road we were on and pulled up about 2 minutes later and took us home. My friend and I had never been so scared in our lives. I haven't been to those train tracks since, and to this day, I still think about the man who knew I wasn't on the phone and what his intentions were that day.
I've been on the sub for a couple years now. Had my own couple Let's Not Meet moments, but for some reason tonight I just needed to share what happened. For context, I'm in school still and work for my family member on certain weekends at a local college selling concessions at the stadium. It's about once, twice a month and the stadium is off towards the edge of town. It's Friday night. I just had gotten out of school and I had to go straight to work. I get to work for 4 hours, and my boss tells me we need more spoons for tomorrow's event. I say, okay, I'll go grab them on my way home. The only store open with heavy-duty spoons is all the way on the other side of town, and I still wanted to go and meet up with some of my friends and mess around. I decided to take the faster but more sketchy way around the outskirts of town. I live in a weather bipolar state. It snowed last night, but I figured the roads would be fine enough even if they weren't plowed. I take off to the store and the first 5 minutes go by and nothing's wrong. I haven't seen a single car or any buildings the entire time. But keep in mind, it's approaching 9 PM and I'm on the outskirts of town, and no one really takes this way in case they really have to. All of a sudden, I see something in the corner of my eye, and it looks like a man, roughly 5'8" I'd say, wearing shorts, t-shirt, and a backwards hat. He's in the ditch, walking in snow when it's 10 degrees out. My first thought is to pull over, but I'm on the phone with my mom at the time and she warns me not to, as some things have happened before in this town. I consider stopping, but for some reason I tell myself not to. I wasn't really worried about anything. I'm a young dude driving a big pickup truck. That's the type of person anyone would want to harm, right? I pass the man, going about 40 miles per hour. I drive not even 500 feet past him, and immediately, a car that I did not see at all before turns on and pulls out of a field entrance off the road and starts to follow me. At first I thought I just was focused on the man in the ditch and didn't see a road, and that's where they came from. But I later found out there was not a road there. Now again, I'm not super worried. I've watched my fair share of crime movies and read plenty of stories on this sub, and I didn't feel it was a threat yet. I start to approach the town again and have to take some turns to get where I'm going. I turn left, the car turns left. I turn right, car turns right. I'll go around a roundabout and skip my turn and go twice as no one else was there. Car follows. At this point I start to worry a little, but maybe they just need to go to the store also. I then pull up to a stop sign and I turn without my turn signal. The car follows. Now at this point I should have went straight to the police station, but I still didn't think much of it. I'm 2 miles from the store where plenty of people will be. I take a few more turns and the car continues to follow me. I completely blew a stop sign at a non-busy intersection and the car does a quick stop and go and catches up. At this point I'm 2 turns till the store, so I'm still not worried. I turn to the store and the car turns also. The store also has a gas station, so I pulled there first to act like I was getting gas. The car sits off to the side of the road and just sits there. I wait about 10 minutes and the car doesn't move. At this point I start to get worried. I'm a young kid alone at night near the bad side of town. I call my friends I'm supposed to meet up with later on and give them the license plate for worst case scenario, then take off to the store. I cross the street and the car comes straight behind me. I'm freaking out on the phone, not knowing if I should call the cops or not. I go and park as close as possible to the store, and the car parks 3 rows behind me and a couple down. It's getting late at this point and the store's closing soon. There's only a couple others in the lot. I turn my truck back on and go park on the complete opposite side of the lot. Get out and I completely bolt inside of the store. I'm not super overweight, but I'm not skinny either. About 6'1" and 200 pounds. Who would want anything to do with me? I get spoons, take my time in the store. I go to call my friends to walk back outside, and my phone is dead. I look out the sliding doors and suddenly there's a white van next to my driver's side. Looks like no one's in it, but the back windows are covered and it's running. Big red flag. I run to customer service and explain everything, but they think I'm some young kid messing around. At the time I didn't see the original follow car, but no way I'm going outside with that van next to my truck. After waiting what seemed like hours, the van pulls forward and the original car appears from the sides of the building. You came from the in-store Starbucks window. They talked, and both drove off. I wait another 10 minutes and dash outside. I speak to my friend's house, and when I get there I park in his garage. My one buddy asks me why there's a big orange mark on my tire, and my heart sinks. When I was inside, the follow car must have marked my tire. After inspecting the rest of the truck, we find a small pipe dropped in the bed of my truck surrounded by snow. It was about 2 inches wide and I'd say about 18 inches long, wrapped in duct tape. It was not mine. I was alone, no phone, scared, in a part of town I'm not familiar with. I try to laugh it off, but now that everyone's asleep, I can't help but think what would have happened if I walked outside. I've always been sort of ego boosted on the fact I'm a chubby fat dude that no one would want to mess with. But after tonight, I realize anyone can be a target. So creepy men who followed me all night and waited by my truck? Let's not meet. Update, police came and took the pipe today. As multiple of you said, and I knew already, they can't really do anything about it as nothing really happened. They said that they'll look into the license plate, but other than that, nothing much can happen, as no crime were committed.
I've just recently discovered this subreddit and I have a story to share that has really traumatized me for quite a while now. And I feel like this is a good place to share. And it will be my first big Reddit post. A lot, if not all, the posts I've read from here are American/Canadian. So for context, it's important that I start with I am from Aotearoa, New Zealand. We do have the odd missing person or scary case, but it's otherwise safe here and not much happens. I mean that in a way that as a 19-year-old girl, I feel comfortable to walk the streets at night or go on hikes alone because it's pretty safe and everyone looks out for one another generally. This happened in the summer of 2019. I will link a location so you can better understand and hopefully some photos if I find them online. My boyfriend and I were headed out on a picnic date to a spot we have visited before plenty of times, Karakariki Track. It is at the end of a very long windy rural farm road off the state highway. So you drive for like 15 to 20 minutes from the main road down a long farm stretch, and at the end is a large cul-de-sac and a surrounding massive farm. The owners of the farm had left the land kind of open to the public as a reserve because there are native trees and other things, and because about a 15-minute walk from the cul-de-sac/car park, there's a small waterfall you can swim in. The track is really popular as it is one of the closest swimming spots to the nearest city, Hamilton, and it's really scenic. You cross footbridges, pass by creek beds, etc. The farmers still go through every now and do their farm work, and there are fenced-off areas the public can't enter as they are still actively working the land. This particular day, my boyfriend and I were super happy because it was empty in the parking lot and it was a super hot summer's day, so that was really rare. The farmer was crossing the cows through the gate on a quad as we arrived, and he smiled and waved at us. He's an older man and we had spoken before as we were regular visitors. So we set off towards the waterfall. We crossed one footbridge and passed through a big paddock of cows. The track is quite narrow and the creek is right off the edges, so you have to be careful. We saw the waterfall and decided against swimming as we had no towels and headed back towards the car park. Now, on our way back, we decided to go down a little bit of a steep gravel off-ramp on the tracks that led to a more private tree-covering area right by the creek. Here's where it starts. We were kissing and whatnot. I was laying on my tummy reading a book, and my boyfriend was sitting up playing on his phone and rubbing my back and playing my hair. We were there for another 10 minutes before I turned and glanced up the gravel path, and way up even further on the hill through one of the farmer's gates, I saw a big man on a quad bike who I didn't recognize as one of the farmers, as there is only an old couple who worked the land. He was just sitting there staring at my boyfriend and I don't even want to think about how long he had been there before we noticed. I told my boyfriend, and as soon as the guy saw we were both looking at him, he opened the gate and started heading down. Now both of us immediately got up to leave as we did not want to have a conversation with a farmer about us getting freaky on his land, which is what we both assumed would happen, but it was so much worse. This guy came down the gravel track and ran his quad right through the creek. He left it there running in the water and got off. He was talking to himself, saying things along the lines of,
I've messed up my quad. I've messed up my engine.
Over and over before he even got near us. My boyfriend and I were gathering our things to leave at this point, and he starts to head towards us. He didn't even make any small talk, which was really strange because he went straight into saying,
Have you guys seen any fish? I'm looking for some fish to kill.
My boyfriend tells the guy that there's no fish in the creek as it's fresh water, and he's probably better off catching some eel, and this sends him into a fit and he starts saying,
I don't want no eel, I want to kill some fish.
I had made it a point to not look the guy in the eyes as I did not want to draw the conversation towards myself because I was already extremely freaked and I didn't want him to notice that. My boyfriend is much more of the calm and strong one when it comes to stuff like this. But for a second, I did look at the guy, and I thought he looked like his face was slightly deformed. Possible Bell's palsy, as I worked in aged care and I'd seen it and it looked similar. I bent down to tie my shoe up, and when I was standing back up, that's when I saw a pistol on this man's waist. Listen to me close now. This is my first and last time in my life I have ever seen a real-life gun. It is incredibly hard to get a firearm in New Zealand, especially after the regulations following the mass shooting in Christchurch. And not only that, he had one pistol on his belt and was waving another one about in his hand while he talked to my boyfriend about wanting to kill some fish. He was aiming it down to the creek every now and again and then swinging it around on his finger. My boyfriend gave me this stern look, and stern is the best word for it because the look spoke a million things to me in the moment, and he nodded his head towards the gravel hill leading back to the track. I grabbed the 2 bags we had, fake-checked my phone, and told the man that our family were waiting for us back at the car park. He completely ignored what I had said and instead said,
"That's a cool hat you've got on."
or something about my head that was completely irrelevant, so I dismissed myself and said goodbye and made my way to the hill. In my mind, I did not want to look back and see my boyfriend be shot and then a gun in my head. I knew that our best bet was me getting up this hill onto the narrow path he couldn't ride his quad down and sprinting to the farmer's house. As I'm walking up the hill, this guy says to my boyfriend,
"That's a really pretty girl you've got there."
And it was like all the intentions of him I didn't want to believe weren't confirmed. I felt like I would die. My boyfriend though said a quick thank you, we'll be off now, and headed up the hill with me. The guy kept talking on like the conversation hadn't ended even as we headed away, and he stood there, gun in hand, watching us leave. As soon as we were around the corner, we sprinted all the way back to the car park where we hadn't noticed before. There were over 10 empty gun shells? Bullet shells? I don't even know, but empty used bullets. We had run into 2 girls in bikinis just arriving at the spot as we did and informed them about everything. They got in their cars and left immediately. We tried to go to the farmer's house to ask if he knew the guy, as we've never seen him on the land before, but they weren't home anymore. As for the gun, it's still so freaky to me as I had never seen one before. But these pistols look quite old and rusty, and when we discussed the incident on the way home, my boyfriend suggested that they were probably handed down to him from someone else. This incident has stuck with me for the past few years, and my boyfriend and I have not been able to return to the spot, which sucks cause that's where we had our first date and it was really a sentimental place for us. I had to drive past the road leading to the track for like a year as I commuted between towns, and it always made me feel sick. I could have lost my life or my partner that day, or so much worse, and I'm always extremely grateful that my boyfriend is the man that he is and was able to steer the guy away from us for us to leave and to communicate to me through movement to tell me what to do in my freaked out state. He told me after that he was ready to die if he had to, because knowing the guy had been watching us beforehand and complimented me in the way that he did, it was clear that he could have had some scary intentions. It's also made me way more fearful now to travel in the bush alone, which I've done my whole life. Any questions? Welcome. Kia ora.
One of the hottest trends on YouTube right now is ordering these random mystery boxes from complete strangers on the deep web and opening them on camera. I don't know why I didn't realize a clear majority of these videos are fake and staged for their scare factor, but I didn't. I thought it was a great idea and hopped on the bandwagon to claim my YouTube stardom that I desperately longed for. For those who don't know a lot about the deep web, it's simply a part of the internet that isn't accessible from your basic Chrome, Firefox, or Explorer search engines. You must download the encryption program Tor and the Tor browser for starters. It's not illegal to access this part of the internet, but since it's anonymous, a great deal of illegal action happen here. The possibilities are endless. I grabbed my laptop I've had since I graduated in 2011 and downloaded the required programs. I prefer to use my laptop over my desktop in case of viruses and such. My 7-year-old laptop is a little more disposable. I had a little Bitcoin phase a few years ago when it was blowing up, so I had a little saved already. It wasn't much, only 0.1 Bitcoin, which translates to roughly 632 USD, but it was enough for what I was looking for. After the downloads were finished, I'd opened the browser and started my journey at the Hidden Wiki website. They provide a lot of useful links to get you started on the deep web. I scrolled through the warnings and gist of what it was and found the links I was looking for. Almost forgot. I muttered to myself as I grabbed the duct tape from my desk drawer. I cut a tiny square piece off the end and placed it over my webcam. Call me paranoid, but I'd rather be safe than sorry. I clicked on the first link and waited what seemed like forever for the page to load. It was another very plain page with a list of popular websites that you could scroll through on the side. I continued my search through the web links until I found a page dedicated to mystery boxes. I wanted to find one around $500 so people knew I meant business on my channel. These were relatively small, staying around the 0.0125 to 0.05 Bitcoin range. I was worried about being scammed. I decided to continue my search after a quick bathroom break. When I came back, I noticed my cursor was off to the side and was able to click on a link that must have matched the background color of the webpage because I couldn't see it. I indulged my curiosity and hit the link. I was taken to a pitch black page with small white texting at the top. I'm selling one random package to any brave enough to receive it for only 0.12 Bitcoin, or best offer. Only one, huh? I thought to myself. I'll shoot my shot. I hit the small payment button and was asked how much I'd like to spend. I entered 0.1 Bitcoin with fingers crossed. The payment went through without any hesitation, and I was instantly met with a chat box asking where I'd like my package sent. I know this wasn't a good idea, and I regret it to this day. But the other YouTubers used their own address often, so I thought nothing of it. I gave them my home address. I waited over a month for the box to come in, 36 days to be exact. It arrived directly on my front porch and was wrapped numerous times in red tape. I'd set my camera on the tripod and adjusted it to show me in the box on this small wooden table. I draped a sheet in the background so it looked a little more professional. I collect some gloves and scissors so I can bang the video out in one go. Hey everybody, welcome to tonight's vlog. Boy, do I have a surprise for you. I continue my monologue mentioning how I got the box and how much I paid. Without wasting further time, let's open this deep web mystery box. I grab the scissors and cut along the red tape. I make sure my gloves are on tight and I rip the box open. My brow furrows as I see just one book. Without saying a word, I take the book out of the box. I was pretty annoyed. I spent over $600 on a book. Well folks, looks like we got us a dud. These pages better be made of gold. The outside of the book was old and tattered, and it smelled of mildew and mold. I cracked the book open to the first page and glanced over the contents. It's an old photo album. It smells of old rot. Let's look at these pictures. I show the camera a view of the page's contents. It has 4 pictures on the first page, all labeled by days. The first picture said day 1, the second day 2, and so on. The pictures were taken with an old Polaroid camera. They were pictures of airplanes, random suitcases, a couple of taxis, and some pretty shady motels. Looks like someone's old travel photos. I continue flipping through the pages. Every day was a different photo of nature or cars or trains. Day 18 held the oddest photo yet. It was just of a mask, handcuffs, a gag, and a bottle of some sort of drug it looked like. I zoom into the picture with the camera so everyone can see it. Around day 32, things started getting weird. There was a picture of a house, but not just any house. It was a house I grew up in, my parents' house. My hand covered my mouth as I gasped for air. How is this? I'm unable to form a sentence. I'm at a loss of words. Day 33. I turn the page and see a man and a woman handcuffed and gagged. I immediately expel the contents of my stomach as I see my own mom's scared and crying face and my dad, face first in a pile of what looks like black tar. Day 34, this photo is taken inside what looks like a vehicle. I'd focus my gaze to the dashboard where a small photo is barely visible. It's an old school photo of me. They're in my dad's truck. Day 35, another house, but this one much smaller. The photo is too blurry to make out the details. My hands are trembling and all I can hear is my heartbeat pounding in my ears. I flip to the last page. I immediately throw the book to the ground and run to the window. I jiggle the hatch frantically and throw it open. Without hesitation, I jump out and run to the neighbors. As I'm running, I turn around for a brief second. What I saw haunts me to this day. A tall hooded figure stood in my room, looking at me through the window. He stood motionless before lifting his hand and waving. I'd screamed for my neighbor who heard me inside and called the cops. I'd sat and just cried. I'd cried out of fear for my life. I'd cried for my parents. I'd cried because it was all my fault. My lack of common sense got my parents killed, and I will have to live with that forever. If you access the deep web, do not release any personal information, even if people on YouTube do it. Most of it's not real, and always check your boxes. It would have saved me a lot of trouble if I would have noticed the box I received had no tracking sticker on it. It was hand-delivered. So, I've been dating my girlfriend for almost a year, and last month, we moved in together. Maybe that's kind of fast, I don't know. My parents sure thought it was, but honestly, everything was great in the beginning. We get along really well, and we've never had more than a brief argument. But then, she started whistling. It's so dumb, I know, but she's always whistling this weird song, and it really gets on my nerves. My mom kept telling me that once you move in with someone, you discover all of the quirks they've been hiding from you. And it's not like I didn't expect that to be true, but for some reason, this is just an ongoing issue with us, and I don't know what to do. At first, I would just hear her whistling it when she was showering. It was kind of cute, like her own little bathroom theme song. I didn't recognize the melody, but it was very distinct. I could mimic it from memory if I wanted to. In fact, sometimes it gets stuck in my head, and it drives me a little crazy. You know the type. After a week or so, I asked her what the song was, and she just laughed. I'm wondering if she came up with it on her own, something that she does absently, especially once she started doing it more. Like, I'd be reading a book and she'd be on the computer, and she'd just start whistling, and I tried to ignore it. I'd seriously feel like a jerk for being so grumpy about it, and I know she wasn't doing it to annoy me, but she would just go on, and it would pull my attention away from whatever I was doing. So I finally said something a few nights ago. I was going over some legal documents for work, and she just started whistling like crazy, on, and I'm trying to just block it out, but it's seriously excessive. Like, I know you guys are probably thinking that I was overreacting, but it felt like just whistling right into my ear, and it just frayed my last bit of patience. As calmly and nicely as I could, I called out to her and asked her to quiet down. She didn't reply. I asked her again, and she still didn't answer. So I left the bedroom and found her in the living room, watching a movie. She wasn't whistling anymore, and for some reason, that really irked me. It felt like she was messing with me, and she just looked over at me, like she didn't know what my deal was. I asked her if she could stop whistling so much, and she told me she wasn't whistling. Now, I get that maybe she doesn't realize she's doing it, but no one whistles that much and doesn't notice. It's not really like her to mess with me like that, and I don't know what she's trying to get out of this. I thought maybe she was teasing or playing a joke, but she had to see how annoyed I was. I asked her again to just not whistle so loudly, and she didn't answer. There was tension in the room, and it felt like our first fight since moving in together. Even though she didn't whistle for the rest of the night, I couldn't focus on my work anyway because I was upset about the confrontation. Then, of course, the next night she was whistling again. I'd hear her when she comes home from work, and she keeps going for at least an hour. I didn't want to have another fight, so I just hung out in the bedroom and listened to her move around for a while. I felt like I was blowing things out of proportions. But honestly, how hard is it to not just whistle all the time? It was no big deal when it was now and then. But I feel like she whistles more than she even talks to me. So I'm sitting up in the room, thinking about that. And that's probably why I was worked up when I finally came down. She was cooking dinner, which is sweet, but she was still whistling. So I said, softly, "Hey honey, maybe we should put some music on instead, so you don't have to fill the silence with whistling." I tried to play it off like a joke, but I knew she'd probably see through it and get annoyed again. She didn't even turn to face me, just huffed and kept cooking. After a minute, I told her I was sorry about the other night, but the whistling just sort of strikes my ear wrong, and if she could try not to whistle so much and so loudly, it would make my life a lot easier. I feel like I was being fair. I know it seems controlling and nitpicky, but it was bothering me a lot. We all have our things, you know? I try not to chew loudly at the table because it bothers her. So why can't she just stop whistling sometimes for me? But she totally freaked out. She turned around and told me she wasn't whistling and she didn't know what my problem was. At this point, I don't get why she was doing this. It obviously wasn't funny for either of us, and she seemed genuinely upset. So I don't know why she kept provoking me. I asked her what her deal was, why she was so defensive about the stupid whistling. She told me to shut up. She told me she was sick of talking about it, like I was the one being unreasonable. I never get mad at her, but I just snapped. I told her to stop whistling before I lost my mind. She called me crazy just because I was getting a little upset, and somehow, that was all I could take. I grabbed one of the cast iron pans from the stove and swung it at her head as hard as I could. She fell over and smashed her head on the counter, but I swung the pan again before she hit the ground. I think I hit her maybe 3 or 4 times. I don't remember, but I feel horrible. There was blood everywhere and her jaw might be broken. No, I think it is for sure. I can't believe I lost my temper like that, and I have no idea how we can move past this. I feel so ashamed for letting things get physical.
regardless of how much she might have been provoking me. But here's the kicker. She's still whistling. And I asked her nicely to please stop, but now she won't even pause. For 2 days she's just been lying on the kitchen floor with her eyes rolled back and her mouth hanging open, just marinating in congealed blood. And she's still whistling. I don't know what to do. I don't want to break up, but this is just too much. I just need her to shut up. Just shut up, just shut up, just shut up, just shut up.